Welcome to Lead with Kindness, your essential podcast for disrupting the workplace with kindness and wellbeing. I'm Helen Rimmer, and I'm armed with 20 years of leadership experience and a passion for positive psychology. I'm here to offer practical tips and share inspiring stories to revolutionise leadership. Ready to challenge the norm? Let's dive in and transform our workplaces together. It's time to make a difference. Let's get started. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce Jo Dew, who is a team coach who focuses on team dynamics with a particular interest in the relationship between individual career aspirations, teamwork, and organisational culture, and how it all slots together, or not. I was really lucky to meet Jo during my PG Cert in the Psychology of Kindness and Wellbeing at work at the University of Sussex. But let's just get going and look into her journey from all of your extensive experience in fostering resilience and purpose-driven workplaces. Hi, Jo.
Amazing. And it was lovely to meet you too, Helen, and that course as well, that PG Cert. I feel like that's been a real platform for all of us.
Yeah.
But more than anything, just to get to know each other. And I just think that's been one of the best aspects of that, is the relationships we've built. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. So, Jo, could you share a bit about your journey and what inspired you to move into the sort of team coaching space?
Yeah, absolutely. So my early career, I started in the commercial sector. So I was in marketing. I did a degree in marketing and was lucky to move into marketing roles in telecoms. So I worked for Orange, telecoms company, T-Mobile, which strangely those two companies then merged. So that was very weird, like later on after I'd left. But there was a period where, whilst I absolutely loved marketing, I didn't feel motivated anymore by those kind of commercial objectives in terms of shareholder value and all of that kind of thing. So I was very lucky. I'd got a really good grounding in marketing, but I was looking for ways to apply that in other spaces. And on a particular day, I was driving to work, I was stuck in traffic, and I happened to pull up alongside a Macmillan Cancer Support van, which does road shows across the country. And at the time, there were only two. So the chances of me pulling up alongside the motorway for this Macmillan van was quite slim.
Wow. Yeah.
And I was reading the marketing messages on the back of the Macmillan van, and it kind of was referring to 1 in 3 people are affected by cancer and the support they provided. And the penny dropped that I could apply my marketing knowledge to the charity sector. And the very strange scenario was that I then got to work in my lunch break. I actually had a quick look on the Macmillan website, looked on the jobs board. There was a marketing job that was live. It closed at midnight. I was working really late that day, so I'd worked until 10 because I had some big assignment or presentation to do. I got home, so between like 11 and 12, I did my job application for this job. I submitted it on the button of midnight.
Wow.
I'm pretty sure this was a Thursday. And then I had a long weekend plan to just, chill and do not very much. So I'd got the Monday booked off holiday. I got a call on the Friday from Macmillan. Could I go for a job interview on the Monday? I already had that day booked off as holiday. So I was like, actually, yes, I can.
Wow.
I went for the interview, and then a week after that, I was offered the job as a marketing manager at Macmillan Cancer Support. So moved into the charity sector.
Wow, what a story. I love that sort of alignment of everything going on there.
Yeah. So
brilliant.
It was the leap that I needed. It was how I like to do things, I think, in my career and how I approach things generally. It seems on the outside that I leap into things, but actually I'm being quite considered in what I'm doing. I'm trying to take what I've learned and how I can apply that in a slightly different way or in a slightly different direction. And then the same is true of my coaching. So I now coach teams in the charity sector. So I had a lovely and just amazing experience, really, mostly in the charity sector. I didn't experienced lots of unkindness, which I know lots of us have over the years, but I loved my time in the charity sector. But I actually almost moved into coaching because I wanted to do more with more teams. I loved my team, but I liked the idea of applying everything I was learning about leading teams. So I went on to work for a number of other charities, but I really liked the idea of applying that team aspect kind of multiple times rather than just with one team. I was kind of eager and thirsty to do more of the team element. So I moved over and set up my own business.
Yeah. And talking to you helped me inspire me.
Oh, amazing.
Conversations with you.
Oh,
But
lovely.
that same thing, people think I make big leaps, but actually there's a lot bubbling under and coming together and finding purpose as well, though, isn't it? There's something about that purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's that idea, back to kind of what we were talking about in the introduction, but it's that idea as career, the significance of career to the meaning in our life and what it brings, and that it's constantly evolving and we don't get every step right, and we don't, it doesn't always have this big like long-term direction and goal that's written down and it's really clear. Some of it becomes obvious to you. And as I get older, I get more and more intrigued by like the signs and the hints and the things, like the opportunities that you can take or choose not to take, but they are there, I think, a lot of the time.
Yeah. And I think careers are so often now not linear, that they are, when we were growing up, people like older people had very linear. They got a job and they stayed in that job, and yes, they might move up in the company, but that was that. Might stay, most they do is leave sectors, but more and more people are having multiple careers in there. And also, I don't know about you, but I'd reached a high level in my job and I was looking to 25 years before retirement. Where else could I go? What do you do? So there's also that element, isn't there? We've got a long career ahead of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I still think there are some linear careers out there, and they I think the right people are suited to that form. I know for me personally, I actually quite enjoy, it's times when it feels a bit scary, but I think I enjoy the sort of career as, river flowing in all sorts of different directions, and then sometimes it's a waterfall and sometimes it's swampy muddy marsh. But
absolutely,
I think I like the not knowing, like knowing enough and knowing like what your next few steps are. I get less and less attached, I think, to this like final thing of what it's going to be, or I practice being less attached. I suppose we still have a bit of that. Like my parents had a fairly linear career. Their parents absolutely did. So culturally, like that's the model that we saw happen. So there's still times when my brain goes, oh, maybe you should have just done the safer thing and stayed in a job, but I just don't think that was going to be as fun for me.
I think that brings us quite nicely on to the next question I've got for you, which is, how does finding meaning and purpose in your work contribute to people's well-being?
It's such a great question, and this, we could probably chat for the next 3 hours about that.
Oh yeah. Basically, people are eavesdropping on our chats, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly, which is fine. That's nice. And then hopefully they'll invite us to their chats too, and we can eavesdrop on them too.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah.
It's lovely hearing other people's thoughts on this too. But yeah, so because I work with the charity sector, and I think possibly in lots of the sectors you've worked in too, and I'm always very conscious to make sure I'm not saying this isn't true of the commercial sector either, but I think in the charity sector in particular, our meaning in life and our meaning in work are very interwoven. So a lot of people work for causes that they feel very, very motivated by. So I worked for a cancer charity, I've worked for a hospice, I've worked for an air ambulance. All of those, I felt incredibly proud to be even a small part of them delivering their mission, which is to, support the people who are impacted by all those different things. Ultimately, that's about other human beings, and I was always particularly interested in that kind of medical health. And again, I didn't think that through. It just sort of happened that was what I, often applied for as such. But I think meaning and career are just so interlinked, and it's not thinking about that or not having an awareness of that, which sometimes gets us into more tricky water or causes more conflict at work, for example, because we come to work thinking that everyone knows and understands that about us. And we forget that, like, we're all like icebergs, and that our a lot of what we share with our colleagues is just very much the tip of the iceberg, but our values and our beliefs and why we're there, it can go a lot deeper than that. And we don't always, myself included, don't always spend as much time thinking about that bit below the waterline. We just kind of think we know ourselves, and we think that everyone else knows us too.
Totally get that. Can you think of any effective strategies that you've discovered in your research, in your experience, to prevent burnout, especially in high pressure roles like your fundraising roles and other corporate roles as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my resilience and results program is designed to do that, and I've delivered that over the last few years with probably upwards of 30 teams now, and I have 4 very specific modules and a couple of interlinked ones that people can choose from. But the ones that I think are most important and the strategies within that are playing to your strengths, which I know you will know and love. So I always start there, because I think that's a really positive place to, it's a positive platform for starting to build self-awareness and think about, how do I prevent burnout? I also look at how to manage your energy, not your time, because we spend a lot of time managing our diaries and fitting in more meetings and that kind of thing. But we don't think about what drains our energy and what tops up our energy. And even if we're about to do something that we think might drain our energy, let's say a big presentation, we don't always think, right, how am I going to we prepare for the presentation, but we don't prepare for the impact on our energy or our mental load or our emotional load. So adding that kind of preparation to it. Then the 4th thing I cover is looking at emotions, and just to build our language around emotions and being comfortable about talking about them with people at work. And I think we're getting better at that as post-pandemic. There's a lot that we learn, I think, but again, still, not super comfortable with sharing how we're feeling with people at work. And also the regulation that goes in there as well, because we also don't want to go to the other extreme and constantly be sharing how we feel all the time, or we're in a bad mood and then we just share that, and then actually the next day we're feeling better, but actually everyone else is then in a bad mood because we were just horrible to everybody. So there's emotional awareness and emotional regulation in there. And then the 4th thing is awareness and acceptance. So I go through which is from another theory around acceptance and commitment therapy, but that's or acceptance and commitment training. So it's doesn't have to be therapy, but looking at coming back to our values, regular reflection on that, then deciding what we commit to in our jobs. What are the things we can, with our hearts and with our heads together, what can we commit to doing? And then we kind of make those promises within our workload, mostly to ourselves, but also with teams. And then what do we accept that we can't control? So again, in lots of the charity teams that I work with, they're trying to control all these different variables, which they can't actually. So in terms of the economic environment at the moment, that's one that charities are really struggling with, because lots of people who would have donated in the past, for example, don't have the financial wherewithal to do that at the moment. So, and charities are kind of, they've got emotions invested in this idea that we're in a economic downturn potentially, but you can't change that. So there's a process by which you kind of a tool where I recommend that you kind of regularly list out the things that you wish were different, but you absolutely cannot change. And there's almost a letting go piece of those things that you can't change.
Yeah, that's really interesting. A lot of I've just recorded a resilience course for librarians, and some of that acceptance stuff is all in there. So yeah, it's really important, isn't it? It's that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think so the founder of ACT is really open to his content. So that's usually I've got his book in front of me, but I haven't. But I'll tell you at the end. But the
I can
founder
put it in the show notes.
Yes, good idea, good idea. Stephen Hayes, Stephen C. Hayes, that's who it is.
Oh yeah.
But he is really, really prolific in terms of developing acceptance and commitment therapy. It's very much evolved into acceptance and commitment training, and you know, it doesn't, when you say therapy, people think, why are we doing therapy in a work context? But it's, you know, it's very much in the training space. But there are so many people out there who've adapted that content for different scenarios, and he is so generous and open with it that so it's a great place to start if people want to find out more about it.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes. So we've talked a bit about sort of individuals and your training and things. But how can you elaborate a bit on the importance of team culture in building that resilience, both for the individuals and the organisation?
Yeah, absolutely. The culture aspect came very much from the course that we did together. So I think, you know, we've explored that, and the difference between culture and climate as well. I just found really fascinating. So the culture is, in essence, how we do things around here, and then the climate is how does it feel right now. And so I think leaders in particular can have, you know, without it feeling overwhelming or this big thing, they can think about what is the how we do things around here looking like at the moment, and what do I want to change about that, and what is the how does it feel at the moment where we work, and what do we want to change about that. And also those are things that, again, for my interest, it's very much about the collective. It's not just about leaders. It's not leaders do like create a framework for the culture, but then everybody is a part of that culture. So I think it's just thinking about those things consciously and having a bit of a plan for how you want to evolve and develop the culture, and also not being scared or not feeling guilt or shame around saying, right, hang on, what's the culture right now, and is it what we want? Because have we evolved by accident almost a culture that isn't the one we want? And we can course correct that without feeling bad, or that as a leader we failed. Let's just say we didn't really, culture evolved and it happened. Now we've got one. Is it the one we want? And if it isn't, how do we reset that? And I think there's quite a lot of ways that you can reset it, and in bite-sized chunks as well, not in this sort of, right, we're going to have to sheep dip everybody in a training course all at once. You know, training courses are amazing. I think we should do those in general. But if it's a culture change piece, I think it's starting to think about what are the tools and the methods and the ways in which over time you want to move I hate the phrase move the dial, but you move the culture, evolve the culture from where it is now. But I think we just exist in them and we act within them, and we don't think about what they are. And I did that too. Like, as a leader, I was part of a culture, and I had quite a lot of gut feelings about what I thought it could be instead, and why I thought it was important. I had no idea really of how, you know, even as a part of a leadership team, at the time, I didn't really have any idea of how to move that consciously. I tried, but I probably did it quite badly, like in terms of, I would say, can we just have a conversation about values, please? And then everyone would be like sitting back or raising eyebrows or making eye contact across the desk, because they were like, well, where's that come from? And why do you think you know more about that than I do? You know, so I think that's the bit that I now know and understand that I didn't understand when I was a leader myself.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, totally get that. It doesn't surprise you. And I think also it's that you're leading a team, but you're part of that bigger organization.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why you can't just change your team culture overnight, because there's other things going on around, other systems, policies, people, impacts and things. And I think it's really important to acknowledge it's actually really hard. And how do you think people can do that sustainably? Like, get it embedded?
Yeah, I think I think it's a really good question. And again, I think that's really important for us as coaches and facilitators to have that in mind regularly, because it's not, you know, again, I don't think it's fair or right for organizations that invest in culture change or team coaching or even one-to-one coaching to not see a lasting impact for what they've done, you know, what they've done. So I think there's a few different ways. So I think it's good to have workshops in terms of getting people to think about, what does culture mean? What does climate, you know, the climate at work mean? And how might we check in on it? And I'd get them to you know, make their own suggestions and get them thinking about it. I also like to use a survey. So you can do a very simple survey. It doesn't mean you have to sign up to a new piece of software. You can use Microsoft Forms and just ask kind of 5 very simple questions. And I've also been told, kind of retrospectively, but I didn't call it this, but that I use appreciative inquiry.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm only just learning about that, really. But I kind of ask 2 main questions of people, which is kind of, what's the best thing about your job at the moment? What's going really well? And what are you finding most challenging? And I kind of leave it quite open then and let people kind of answer those questions whatever feels right for them. But I do that on an individual basis rather than on a group way. And then I try and find the themes there, or help an organisation to find their themes across those things. And then in terms of changing it, I think there's a combination, but as I said, some workshops, and then looking at the competencies. So we often talk about values, and we set the values for the organisation, but the bit we miss often is to turn that into behaviour. Like, what does that actually look like? If I saw someone, so let's say your top values are integrity, passion and innovation. Three favorites that we see often in different places. So if it is integrity, passion and innovation, what does that look like in each role, at each level, in teams? Like, if I walked into that organization and saw somebody who was really living and breathing the values, what would that look like? In the words of Brené Brown, like paint done, what does that, you know, what am I going to see? And I think the competencies is what helps to then document that and bring, you know, and then say, here's a written document of what the values look like when you're seeing them around, and what they look like in your job.
That's really good idea. Do you think that can then also come into job descriptions and any job crafting that's done? And
absolutely. So I over the last 6 months, I've worked with a few different charities, and I've been looking at a combination of job description plus a separate document for competencies, so that if the role evolves and changes, you can change that, or if roles are quite fixed and you don't want to change it regularly, that's also fine. But the competencies are something that can go across wider job categories. So for me, it might be or in the teams that I work with, it might be a certain level, but there's fundraising competencies, and then there might be competencies for the services delivery team, and there'll be commonalities and differences, but each team can then have their own, and I think it's good, I think, to draft them, but then so they've got somewhere to start, but then let them adapt them and kind of take them off as a team and come back and say, right, here's what we think these should be. So I think that's how you bring those values to life, and that's the bit that often I didn't do it back when I was a leader, because I didn't know, I hadn't thought it through, I don't think. And that's what I would do now if I was going back to a leadership job.
Yeah, I know, I love it. And I think it is that creation of different ways of doing things. And yeah, in my previous role, we had to have some quite fixed job descriptions, but similarly, we didn't say the competencies, but actually that's a really good model of doing it, is does this mean? And also the different flavors of it, because you've got the same job description, but different flavors of it across service or a team. It's really, because really,
and I think the reason again why that helps for team dynamics and the individual, getting the balance, is that you can have teamwork behaviors in a competency document which says, here's what great teamwork and collaboration really looks like, and you could suggest, well, do people really need to have that spelled out? But some people do, actually, and it's not a bad thing. It's, some people don't really know. When you say to them, I need you to create a marketing plan, can you go off and create a marketing plan for the charity, please? They might go off and write it, but they may not go off and speak to people outside their sector to get a different perspective. They may not speak to the different department heads, because they might just think, right, I've got to write this marketing plan, I've got a deadline, it's got to be done. So I think the competencies really give you more room to describe what great working looks like, and that's what leads back to the culture piece. And then the job description, you can, that could be, you don't have to, it's not the right place to try and spell out the behaviours piece.
Do you think it also helps people when they start a place, because you don't know from one place to another what is expected when you're asked something?
Absolutely. And I think that's spot on, and I think that's the thing about culture, isn't it? It's like it's just how we do things around here. And that's the bit that, as a new starter, you can't read, like, there's nowhere, like, you get a policy document and you get your job description, but you don't get, this is what the culture is, and you may see this. And also you're becoming part of the culture. That's the other thing I find fascinating about new starters. So when I do strengths work with teams, quite often it's when they've had 2 or 3 new starters and they want to bring the team together, and that, that's a really good starting point. And you could, organizations could add to that a bit more, a kind of, I guess you get to meet people, don't you, when you first start, but it's not spelled out. I had a really amazing colleague in one of my teams who was so thoughtful and insightful, more of an introvert on the introvert extrovert spectrum. And she said to me at the time, it's a bit like a game of snakes and ladders working here. I feel like I make some progress, but then I put my foot in it somewhere and then I slide back down, or I've upset the wrong person who happens to be influential on this other person. And they were genuinely, like, a really kind person. They didn't have any they didn't have any sort of competitiveness to them. They weren't trying, they just were trying to do their job well, but they couldn't put their finger on what were these little potholes or pitfalls they kept getting into, because it was the culture. And I could say to them, well, you must, if you want to speak to that person, you must always speak to this person first, because those 2 people will chat, and so you've got to get them alive, but it's the kind of stuff that you would never think to kind of share with somebody, but also as a leader, it feels a bit odd that you have to explain all of that, really.
Yeah.
It's just like,
Yeah.
here's your job. It'd be great if you could just go off and work on that. And then you need this other document which explains kind of,
Yeah.
and even that, I suppose you couldn't put that in a competency.
No. Yeah, there's this weird dynamic here.
Yeah.
I've written about legacy toxicity in my blog, and that's like the really negative end of this culture, but where everything's always been done like that, and as a newbie coming in, you're like, oh, but why is this all like that? Why are they saying no to this personally reasonable request? But there's just so much history there, and so something I'm really passionate about is unpacking that and helping people to understand the reasons for it. And it's really difficult if you come in as a new leader to find out actually what's going on. And that's where you can, like we were saying, as a leader, you can sometimes really struggle because you start to ally yourself with one group. Goes back to my favorite theory from our course of leader member exchange. But that sort of, you find yourself allying, but at the same time, are you alienating some other people? What are you doing? And I love to coach people through that, like how to start a new role. Avoid those pitfalls of that. And then, funnily enough, someone just said to me, one thing they think happens a lot is the sticky middle. So actually the leader wants a change, the people further down want to change, but there's that sticky middle team or an organization who are the really entrenched sort of ones, who are the people that you have to get both of them on side and things like that.
Absolutely.
Yes,
and I feel like we've got several other episodes here, Helen, where we could talk about this
series.
I think so the new starter thing is really interesting. And I think being a new leader is also another really interesting avenue. And I also think an offshoot of some of this is how decisions get made in organizations, and what is the cultural aspect of that, and what is the process aspect of that. So I also work as a trustee for a charity, and I work with people who are also trustees. So that's a slightly different role in charity organisations. It's a volunteer role, but it's quite a strategic senior role. And it's there as a kind of check and balance in some ways. But when we try and get decisions in a trustee meeting, again, there's a whole set of kind of team dynamics of the trustees who don't actually work together on a day-to-day basis. So again, you can explain to people, well, this is how, if you're trying to get the trustees to sign something off in a meeting, this is how to go about it. And if they don't work in the charity sector, they look at you like you're absolutely crazy, because they're like, well, surely I can just come in and present my really good idea and then everyone will decide if they like it or not. And it's like, well, yes, in theory, but there is a whole process that goes with this. This person over here will be the more risk adverse person, and therefore your document or your idea has to cover that off. And this person over here will be the person who's much more focused on diversity and inclusion, because they come from a background on that. So you need to, so it's this people dynamics bit every time, which I find it all fascinating.
Me too.
And I don't think I've always been good at it in terms of spotting those things either, which is why I think I like partly to study it in some ways, because it's like, I need a bit of a framework around this. Otherwise I'm going to be the one putting my foot in it.
I've made a note. We can do some follow-up episodes on being a new starter and new leader, and helps us support.
Absolutely.
Our little series, a mini series within the podcast.
I like it.
Series. So how do you think leaders can foster that personal resilience in themselves and their teams?
I think that's a really, really good question. I mean, I think the first thing is that do leaders really think about their own resilience? And again, I don't think I did when I was a leader. I thought I focused on my team quite a bit, which I think a lot of people do. And I think your kind, brave thing is always a really nice dynamic. So I'm often looking at kind plus assertive, because again, a lot of the people I work with feel very kind, and they've got that bit you know, that comes naturally to them. The bit that comes less naturally is that kind of assertiveness and clarity, I suppose. So I think spending time thinking about these things and not seeing it as a indulgence, investing in yourself and staying loyal to yourself. I think that's like, what would staying loyal to yourself look and feel like to you in terms of you as a person, the leader you want to be, the job you want to have? Because you can also end up in a job as a leader that you're like, well, this isn't really what I wanted to be doing or spending my time on. So I think it's investing in yourself, whether that's with coaching or self-reflection or you know, even regular time off to think about your energy and how you're going to top that up. And then you could add in these layers, I think, of if you're a leader plus a parent, and you're juggling all those other things, like where is the time? Doesn't have to be like take a whole day off and go for a spa day, but well, they do that too. But where, like, and how do you build it in regularly? Not just, this is the thing about burnout, isn't it? It's how do you plan, like build it into your every single day, every single week way of looking after yourself, mentally and physically. It's not, looking after yourself and your resilience and your well-being isn't a reward for working hard. It is, it's the thing that enables you to work hard in the first place. And choose that consciously. It's not that we just perpetually work hard and then kind of go, oh God, why did I just spend the last month working late and doing all these things when actually I didn't really want to do that.
Totally get unsurprisingly totally on board with that. I love the loyal to yourself bit. I often talk to people about their non-negotiables. What are the things that you absolutely have to be there, like if they're looking at a new job or whatever? And I think it's really important to be aware of that. So from your perspective, how can professionals better integrate their work with their personal life to achieve a healthy balance?
I think that's a really good question. And I never know whether, you know, when people describe work-life blend, work-life integration, or, you know, any of those words, I don't think I've ever found a word that I've been like, right, that's exactly it. Like, that's the one, like that describes it for me. I agree. One of the places I start is with the non-negotiables, I think. So I'm totally with you on that. I think there's something about self-reflection on a regular basis so that you know what your non-negotiables actually are. Because it's not always obvious. So when I was a leader, for example, I watched a movie that had a very sad ending, where parents, it wasn't to do with not spending time with your kids, it was actually a bit more dramatic than that, but it was a movie, so not real life, so that's good. But when things move you, where do you go to? Like, what do you think of? And I would constantly think of wanting to pick my kids up from school. Like, I didn't used to pick them up. They used to go to club, and then I'd pick them up at kind of 6 o'clock in the evening, 5 o'clock on a good day. I now pick them up at 3 times a week, not every single day, but 3 times a week I'll pick them up when school finishes at 3:20. And the joy of my 7-year-old running out of school to me at full pelt, and literally she does this every day, she'll run at full pelt, leap into my arms and like give me this big hug. Like, it's never less than that. She's always just like, she's like a rocket out of school.
Brilliant.
But I didn't, like, I was very focused on my career, and I still am. So I think they're not going to blend, honestly. I don't think work and life are going to blend, depending on how, you know, work and career are going to blend. They're always going to rub up against each other and create friction. My one simplest tool that helps me is to pick 2 values which I feel like I can stay true to. And one of my values is freedom, and that's almost personal freedom and career freedom. again, why working for myself works for me. And the other one is family time.
Yeah.
So those are my two guiding values. And then I just think about how do I invest in each little pot,
Yeah.
but totally dropping, and back to that acceptance piece, accepting that they're probably never going to fit together in a way that goes, oh, it's all running smoothly
Yeah.
and I've got my work sorted and I've got plenty of time to do that. And my family life is all smooth and that's sorted. And, you know, that happens in tiny little pockets every so often. But it's almost always a big, like, right, how am I going to get that big chunk of work done? Because I really want to do it, actually. And it's with an organisation I'm really enjoying working with. How am I going to do that and still stay true to my picking up at 3:20? Because I don't want to, you know, start putting them back in club till 6. So I think it's letting go of the idea that they'll ever integrate or they'll ever be balanced.
I absolutely agree. And it's made me think about, so pre-pandemic, I was totally happy with my life and my son was at club till 6:30 sometimes, you know. We dropped him off at 7:30. You know, it was all just bumbling along. You know, I'd work from home maybe once a week, but I never considered getting him from school. You know, pandemic, obviously, that was the ultimate showing up how it doesn't all work together. I also had put in place a thing where he didn't see me work. So I never worked from home in front of him. And then, of course, the pandemic threw that up. And that really, obviously, that was one of my non-negotiables, and it was thrown into complete disarray. And so the pandemic, various other things, my burnout and things, all have made me realise that for me, being there, picking him up, or at least most of the time, so he's got 3 days a week. He has clubs and sometimes after school clubs, plus he still goes to his bigger after school club till 6 once a week. Having that time to juggle and do things. He's older, so I can go, like, in the holidays, come up and do a bit of work and then come down again. That's all right. But but I won't do a whole day like that. You know? And yesterday I picked him up from school and we went for a walk at a local National Trust place. And I was like, this is it. This is my thing. I can dream of it and do it. But I was lucky that in the transition between the pandemic and me leaving, my workplace became, well, it'd always been quite flexible, but it was very much understanding of, actually, you can be from home, or you can work from home in the morning, get the train in, but you've got to get back for your son. They had started to embrace that understanding. And I think that's something I really like working with organisations on, is how can you make flexible working work for you, because not everyone's like me and you and wants to go have that freedom to work for themselves, but they equally need to work out a way of juggling it all. And that
absolutely and that's where I think wellbeing training, wellbeing coaching, or, you know, courses is really helpful for organizations, because again, I think where so let's say an organization is really flexible and exactly as you've described, you know, really supportive, it's still, I think, in our expectation that that's then going to feel really smooth and easy and not stressful. And I think it still feels stress. It's a different type of stress, and I personally think you have more pockets of like, oh, this is really good now. I'm like, I've focused on my kids. I have switched off, like, certainly as a coach. But I think even when you're doing that kind of going into the office, leaving earlier to come home and collect your kids, all of that, in some ways and some of the time it's harder, because when you go to the office, you don't have that clear day, all like 9 till 5:30 or whatever it happens to be, where no one expects you to come home and collect the kids. You've now got the added expectation that you're somehow magically going to do all of that and get home, look after the kids, be there, make their dinner, and have done a really good solid day's work.
And it is,
so I think it is that balance again. And I particularly enjoy focusing, so I'm you know, I know through research that multitasking is a myth. Like, we think it's a good thing, and I think women in particular get told, oh, you're really good at multitasking, because what that really means is you're really good at doing lots of different things that somebody else doesn't want to do. And fitting that in around everything else. So
Yeah.
it's that women are good at tasking, not multitasking.
Yeah.
But so it's letting go of the notion that you can do all these different things and not feel stretched, and that you'll suddenly get to a point where, oh, it's all calm and it's all, it's all sorted. So I think it is knowing when you want to have that focus day.
Yeah.
And say, right, there's something I really want to do. I want to, completely devote to it. I had a day like that over the Easter holidays, and I let my 2 children sit in front of their screens for a solid chunk of time, which used to be one of my non-negotiables in terms of parenting, like this amount of screen time and that's it. But I knew I really just wanted to get this piece of work done. I needed to give it like a good 3-hour chunk at least. So it's letting go of the guilt of it not being this perfect blend, and knowing it's not, so I then did actually get to focus, and I was like, yes, I've written that thing that I really wanted to write. And that's back to my freedom bit, like my freedom. I felt like I was making progress. And then I had the next day where probably didn't go smoothly at all. I'm trying to think. We had loads of different arguments over Easter.
But
too much space.
To your acceptance thing, isn't it? Accepting that this day is not going to go to plan. This day is going to be like this. And I think there's also something there about people really accepting that it's never going to be that easy all the time. And I remember having conversations with people about their flexible working requests that was sometimes so complicated, and it's like, but actually, is that going to work? And actually, that's another reason it's good to step away from being the person actually making the decision. I can now support people in that space on both sides to understand how to have those conversations about it. Because the other thing is, you can get yourself, oh, I'm finishing at 4 in London. What if the trains are all up the creek? It's really stressful.
Absolutely.
So work out how much time it has to be at home, how much time, and all of those sort of different moving parts, I suppose, of it all.
Absolutely. And I think as well, like as leaders and within organizations, it's okay as well to say, well, I do need this, like there's something that we need, like whether it's time together as a team. It may not physically have to be in an office. It might, in the summer, might be outside and you go for a nice walk together and you do some planning. But that being together face to face is something, it's easy to just let it roll, and we kind of go, well, we haven't done a team meeting this month, but we'll do one next month. And so, so we started working on teams. That's been really easy. But I think, again, as a leader, you're trying to find that balance of what the organization needs, and it has to be, again, hand on heart, genuine. It can't just be I like being in the office, therefore I want other people to come and sit with me so that I feel like
so I'm not alone.
Exactly. And we've also spoken before about the kind of possible male focus on that as well, because it's returning to a way of the world that people were kind of used. Exactly. It did work for them, didn't it? And I suppose that happens on both sides, actually, to be like
totally
neutral about it. That happens on both sides. There's people who kind of, they really do prefer working in the office and having that clear time. But as a leader, you've got to have that confidence to stay true to some of the things that genuinely, hand on heart, do make a difference, that have to be done either in person or with some focused time, or I don't think it works when people are constantly like multitasking not being a thing, but switching between things. If people are looking after children as well as I could do that, writing a document for that one fixed time, because they knew that after the end of that I was going to take them out or do something else. I couldn't have worked 2 solid weeks like that.
No. And that's exactly like me. I could come and have a quick 15-minute conversation with someone because he was totally fine, or even an hour's chat, all fine. And again, screen's really helpful there. But I also think your point of really think about why people have to be in the office and have those
Yes.
conversations. Actually, you might be saying everyone come in the office on Wednesday, and 3 of the people are like, but Wednesday really doesn't work for me, but a Tuesday would. Have
Yeah.
those conversations, because actually the block to something happening could
Yeah.
be really small, or it could just be, I just can't get here for 9,
Yeah.
but I can't, I'm very stressed getting here for 9 could be the thing, couldn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Actually, if I get in for 10, I will likely be here by 9, but I don't have to worry about if the trains are delayed and so on. And that sort of like conversation to get to know your team is
Yeah.
really important. And that's where I think whole organisation mandates are a bit of an enemy for this.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it's a real balance, because I do understand the whole organization mandate thing. It does come from the idea that we want to reset the culture, or we
Yeah.
want to set the culture. And so, and a place of fairness. So
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
people, leaders in organizations that kind of do the organization mandate, they want fairness, they want
Yeah.
to reset the culture, and they also want clarity. So they
Yes.
don't want to have to hold in their head like,
But
this
everyone's
person
there.
works a Tuesday and that person works a Wednesday, and that, it's very hard, I think, to juggle all of that. But it's thinking about that, I think, planning for that, doing that kind of hand on heart, like, is this about the organization, or is this about me personally as a leader in some way? And having that reflection time about it.
Yeah.
Because so I worked with a great, amazing leader in an organization who wanted people back to the office. And when we, in a coaching one-to-one, we sort of explored that a little bit. They said it was because they liked overhearing bits of chit chat between the teams, and then that gave them quite a lot of information about what people were working on.
Oh.
So then we explored if you take that out, how else might you get that, like, or how else might you slightly more openly, get to know what people are working on. And actually what they wanted to do was just kind of listen into things.
Yeah.
And again, not necessarily a bad thing. You could say that was quite, ear to the ground, back to the shop floor type way of approaching it. So not a bad thing, but it's just not something you could have openly explained to your staff that's
Yes.
kind of why you wanted them in.
Yeah.
So again, I think it's that stopping and thinking, which of my values, which of my beliefs,
Yeah.
which of my personal preferences
Yes.
am I wrapping up in culture?
Yeah, that's so true. And it's also, we had a real issue because working in a library, the people who had to be on site were the people on the customer service desk who were the lowest paid.
Yeah.
Actually, is that fair? So we did a lot of work trying to work out ways that they could have some time at home, that they could have some flexibility. And touch wood, we were getting somewhere. But it was, for some people, it was never going to be enough. For other people, they were like, but I don't care, I want to be on site. And actually, you have to really bear in mind some of the sort of EDI aspects of it, the cost of travel. We also had comments where people were like, I live in London, that's really expensive. But then other people were like, I live out of London and my travel's really expensive.
Yeah.
So the two sides of it were, it's all, I think it's going to be a forever conversation as different generations come up, as different people's needs and expectations. I think that's the other problem, is people, like you say, they want certainty. So they want to do something that's going to be the norm for the next 30 years. And I don't think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think certainty is a really interesting one. Again, I think leaders could reflect on certainty and what are their beliefs about that? What are their hopes and expectations about either having certainty or providing certainty? And then again, a kind of, what can I commit to on that, and what do I just need to let go of? Because leaders can bring some structure and some, I almost don't want to say certainty, but some certainty. But there is, again, so much that people expect of their leaders that, genuinely they can't bring certainty. And usually not for any sort of bad motivation, or they will always be juggling a lot of variables that they're doing their best to control, but lots of them they just can't.
Yeah, and the pandemic really showed that, because we were in that ever changing. And
Yeah,
actually, I know some of my team found that really, really difficult, because they were like,
yeah,
but last week you said we were coming back to site, or
yes,
you said the students would be allowed in, and now you're saying the students can't come in. But
yeah,
the government was changing its mind every 5 minutes. Other people, you're part of. I think the other thing that really helps organisations is to understand the role of a team leader, is that they are part of a bigger organisation. They're going to advocate for their team, but they also
yeah,
have to advocate for the people above, down,
yeah,
sort of thing.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely. I think there's another podcast in
yeah.
there
Another one on
about,
that. There we are. Flexibility.
yeah, I think it's, did you call it the sticky middle in one of
Yeah,
our, yeah, I think that's really interesting, that the balancing of loyalty to team versus loyalty to organization, and
yeah,
again, how to find your true north through that.
yeah,
Because you, I mean, you need to be loyal to both,
yeah.
and it can be really hard to balance that dynamic, I think. And
Mm.
yet, team, I don't, have you heard the phrase, culture eats strategy for breakfast?
Yes, you told me it.
So culture eats strategy for breakfast, but if anything eats culture for breakfast, it's team.
Yeah,
Um, and that's where typically people are more loyal to team than they are to organization.
yeah,
They feel stronger relationships to team than they do to organization, and they, yeah, they feel that that's a more supportive relationship. So again, you kind of need to harness that without creating these competing teams, basically, or competitive teams, or unhelpful silos.
yeah.
Silos themselves aren't bad.
Mm.
It's how those silos then work together and don't cause friction, or cause positive friction that results in good ideas and moving forward.
Yeah,
But yeah, people will be much more loyal to team than organization, and that's because it brings more benefits to them in terms
yeah.
of day-to-day relationships, people that they can work alongside and rely on.
Mm.
Yeah, it's very interesting dynamic.
Fascinating. So as we're drawing to a close, I'm
Yes.
just going to ask one more question.
Yeah.
Where do you see the future of workplace wellbeing and kindness heading, especially in the context of all the different global challenges going on?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting, isn't it? I back to the kind of introduction piece. I think there's much more scope to explore the dynamic between individual career aspirations and
Mm,
individual career hopes, dreams, and expectations, and the organization and the teamwork side. And kind of, I see lots of roles, and I am absolutely not a forecaster or researcher in any way. This is very kind of what I see, but I see more and more roles being more flexible,
mm,
um, in terms of more freelance jobs, for example, more, I want to say gig economy
mm,
concept, but that concept
mm,
in organizations that have much more traditionally had direct employment models, where here's
mm,
a team, they all report to this line manager, and that line manager reports to the next line manager. I
mm.
think there's going to be lots more scope for people to have a portfolio career where they might work for an organization they would have worked for 5 days a week before, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. They might work for them 3 days a week and write on the other 2 days a week, for
Yeah,
example. And I
yeah,
think that aspiration is, I'm going to say, in the younger generation. That's a broad category, but I think possibly we are the last generation of even remembering what that linear career
yeah.
looks like, even having that as a framework.
Mm,
That's not going to be there anymore. And the benefit of it not being there anymore, because you lose security, there's lots that you lose, but what you gain is that freedom and that
yeah.
flexibility to have, yeah. There's a YouTube video about multi-potentialism, which I always
Ooh,
find really interesting, but it's about the fact that lots of people don't fit the traditional career model, like do these A levels or do this qualification, go to university, learn this subject, become the
mm,
thing, let's say, an accountant. I did this, I became an accountant, and now I'm an accountant for the next, exactly as we said at the beginning, 50 years.
Yeah.
People are going to go and do things that they're just really interested in.
Yeah.
And then so my daughter wants to be a lepidopterist, which is a butterfly expert, a zoologist. She also wants to do wildlife photography. And she's also she enjoys trampolining. So she's going to be doing some sort of, that's probably more of a hobby. But I could see her career being a related, but like collective mix, a portfolio of, she can be a lepidopterist and a zoologist and a wildlife photographer.
Yeah.
She can absolutely do that.
Yeah.
And maybe she, as I said at the beginning, a librarian as well.
I'm all for that. My eldest, he wants to be an architect and design Pokemon cards and design and he loves pandas, and he'd like to design a panda enclosure.
Yeah.
So, and there's no reason he can't.
No, absolutely. He can do all of that.
Yeah.
So I think the crux is really how to harness the benefits of that and not burn yourself out trying to spread yourself too thin across, because you have to have some experience, some knowledge, that I think it's finding the connections across those things.
Yeah, definitely.
And having awareness of how to manage your energy.
Yeah.
But again, I think, again, my daughter will say, I'm feeling a bit stretched. I think I'm signed up to too many clubs at the moment. I want to kind of focus on just this one thing. And they have that awareness already, I think, of managing their energy in a way that certainly I never did. I didn't even think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I think that's really, really important. So finally, is there one key takeaway you'd like our listeners to remember about finding purpose and preventing burnout in their professional lives?
Yeah, I think it is that loyalty to self part that we spoke about earlier, and exploring what that means for them. So that is around having a purpose that's doesn't have to be this enormous thing. It could just be to enjoy work, enjoy my family. And I think it's definitely helped me to have those, pick two values. When you set people values exercises in team sessions, people always want a list of like 10 or 15. And I think that's okay if you can then whittle them, you can have 15, but you've got to have two focus ones. Yeah. Really help you. Yeah. So I think it's having two values that help you kind of really focus, and investing in what does self-loyalty look like for you.
Yeah, that's really good. So thank you for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure to let listeners in on the conversations we love to have anyway. Can you tell listeners where they can find you? Yeah, absolutely. The easiest place is always to find me on LinkedIn, because I'm always there throughout the day at different times. And then also lifecoachingcafe.com and teamcoachingcafe.com. But perfect. LinkedIn, in the show I'm always there. Yeah. And thank you again. And thank you to our listeners for joining us on our exploration of kindness and leadership. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for joining us on Lead with Kindness. I hope today's episode has inspired you and equipped you with practical insights to bring more kindness and well-being into your leadership journey. Remember, the transformation towards a kinder workplace starts with us, and every small step counts. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share it with fellow leaders, and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us grow and reach more people committed to positive change. I'm Helen Rimmer, and it's been a pleasure to be part of your leadership journey today. Until next time, keep leading with kindness and fostering well-being in all that you do. Goodbye and take care.